So question 3 of this question was about a consignment stock. So it's IFRS 15 revenue. We've got to explain why the proposed treatment isn't in accordance with what it should be. Now, there's 7 clear points, 7 marks that would get you. Listing the 5 revenue steps, recognising revenue, give you no marks because this is actually just the final step. When do you recognise the sale? Okay. It's all about control, and control being the performance obligation. And that's when you recognise a sale, isn't it? When you've performed the obligation. And that's when you've lost control of the furniture. We'll go into the question in a minute. So you recognise the revenue when the obligation has been satisfied. That's your knowledge mark. Okay, and then you say, right, now I'm going to apply this rule to the scenario. And you go through the rule, making various comments as you go along, what we call application marks. It's the same process in these later questions. State your knowledge specific to the scenario, then apply it to the scenario. So say why the proposed treatment of revenue is not in accordance with IFRS 15. More application marks. You've got to really make it clear why the way they're doing it is not right. Don't just go straight to that though. Go the knowledge. Go apply to the scenario, then say why it's not right. Easier way, easier structure to get all the marks. So just to go into detail in this question a little bit more, the exact knowledge discussion is needed, so the point 5. Then we apply it to the scenario, then we conclude. That's what we do. Okay. So we get told that we supply garden furniture to the garden centre, but we keep the legal title until the garden centre sells. So therefore, it looks like we control it, maybe. Legal title's not everything though, is it? They have no obligation to pay us until it's sold. Makes it seem now like it's still our furniture. We have the right to return or to move the furniture. It really is looking now like we control it. So no control is passed, and so no revenue recognition until the garden centre sells it. But you'd have gone through each of those individual points, like I have, and then, so that's you've discussed the knowledge, this is the application to the scenario, then you would conclude that they're not doing it right because they're recognising revenue straight away. Okay, next question was about a provision, all right? And a provision, just your knowledge marks immediately, you need an obligation, you need to probably have an outflow and for there to be a reliable estimate. Very, very simple knowledge marks. It was about sales tax and income tax, so your structure would be 2 different things. I'm just going to focus on the sales tax at the moment though. Don't just copy and paste on the scenario, that's what a lot of people did. You've always got to add to it and say why you're adding to it. And here it is then, in the scenario, it said, you are subject to sales tax if you've had a physical or economic presence in the country. So therefore, you should create a provision, if they haven't already, for this sales tax when they've made a sale and when they've got a presence in the country. And that would be the obligation. And you would use the scenario to say that. Now we need a reliable estimate of this provision. And we go back to the scenario. It says, well, the risk of detection by the tax authorities is very low. So therefore, the reliable estimate would be 0, maybe. It's widely understood that they only go back 7 years. So maybe you say, well, maybe we should do it for 7 years then. Include interest and penalties. Yes, if we think that's what's going to be payable. And it says at the end, tax authorities can reclaim any sales tax liability from prior years. So actually, it looks at the reliable estimate would be all the years plus the penalties. But you go through each and you make a conclusion. And it doesn't really matter what your conclusion is because you're stating your knowledge, you're using the scenario. Okay, that's the way to pass these questions. Now this final part of the question then said was for 8 marks, and so we want 4 to 5 really good points. So 4 to 5 points out of these 3 things should be easy to pass. Alright, so first one says the advantages to users of the accounts of just using a fixed exchange rate. So one exchange rate fixed. So you should think, well, for the user, how would, got to talk about the advantages. Hopefully you can see, well, it would make trend analysis from year to year a lot easier because you've got a fixed exchange rate. It's not distorted by exchange rates and using lots of different ones. Easy couple of marks. Then say, is that acceptable under IFRS? Oh, good, some nice knowledge marks then. So just use my simple knowledge mark. Say, no, normally what we do is we retranslate a subsidiary at the year end, etc. But the P&L, we can use an average rate, under certain circumstances when that's not going to distort things too much. We are allowed to use an average rate, which relates to the first point, simplifying it because it's better for users. Okay, so we've already passed the question. Now we go on to the third part of it. Would it enhance the usefulness to put foreign exchange gains and losses in OCI? Well, you say, well, if you're talking about OCI, then you talk about instead of the P&L. So by putting them in the P&L, there's going to be distortions to the P&L. So that would be one usefulness of putting it in OCI. And then because it says usefulness of financial statements, that might make you think of the qualitative info characteristics, they're enhancing the fundamental information characteristics. You could have gone a little bit down that route as well, just to make sure you get all the marks. But that was it. Remember, knowledge, specific knowledge to the scenario, application to the scenario, then make your conclusion.